Okay, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about equations, tables, and graphs. So, in math, every situation that you're going to come across can be represented in more than one way. Today we're going to look at how you can use an equation, a table, and a graph to represent a few given situations. So for example, let's say you're driving on the highway at 75 miles per hour. You can represent the distance that you're traveling as distance d, and you want to choose a variable that is meaningful for the situation. So you wouldn't want to say it's x equal to, because x has nothing to do with distance, and distance is what we're representing here. You can write out the whole word if you want to. You don't have to just use a variable, but in general, people tend to use variables because it makes things nice and short, and human beings are pretty lazy. But if you wanted to write out the entire word distance equal to, that's totally fine. You can say that the distance traveled is equal to 75 times however many hours you're on the road at that speed. And I represented that with h, but like I said, if you want to use a different variable, you can, but it would be kind of important to make sure it's a meaningful variable. And if you wanted to write out the whole word hours, that would be fine too. But there's more than just this way that we can represent this. So h is hours on the road. I could also represent this with a table. So on a table, my x side is the left-hand side. Whenever you're looking at a table, whichever is on the left side is x, and if the table goes across, whatever's on the top is your x value. So in this case, the x is time in hours, so 0 hours, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then the distance that you would have traveled in that time. After 0 hours, 0 miles. 1 hour, 75 miles. 2 hours, 150 miles. 3 hours, 225 miles. So here's this situation. We can also use a graph. And now my graph has labels, but it doesn't have units on it. And that's definitely something you want to make sure that you have. So for my graph here, I have on my x-axis time in hours. And the reason that that's on the x-axis is because before, over here, time is on the left-hand side. Whatever's on the left-hand side of your table needs to be on the x-axis of your graph. So this is always the x, and the right one is always the y. This is true in science as well. So if in your science class you have to graph something, or you're given a table, whatever's on the left-hand side is going to be your x value, unless that table goes horizontally, in which case whatever's on top is x. This is also called the independent variable, if you're thinking sciencey. So back here, we've got our time in hours. So I meant for each of these single ticks to be half an hour. Now, when you're graphing these, I want you to make sure that you have your labels on here. I just didn't think to put the labels on before I made the slideshow. So here we have 0 hours. This is half an hour. This is 1 hour, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. And then each of these ticks on the y-axis is going to represent 37.5 miles. Now you can have your scale on y be whatever you want, but it needs to be consistent. You can't have your first block be like 100 and then have your second block be 10 and then count by tens from there. It needs to be the same all the way up. Otherwise your graph can end up looking misleading. And we'll be talking about misleading graphs in class when we go over this. But I've got these dots, and then you can absolutely connect them, or you can leave them as just dots, but that's the graph version of our situation. So we can take a very simple situation, like say going down the highway at 75 miles an hour, and we can represent it 3 different ways. Once with an equation, and when you're making that equation, you want to make sure that you're using meaningful variables. So d for distance, h for hours, or just write out the whole word. Then you can make a table, which is essentially just showing the situation. And then you can also make a graph based on that table. So these 3 different ways of representing something is what we're going to be looking at with this assignment. So the assignment that goes with this lesson you can find in the back of the room. The assignment itself is marked 1-9, equations, tables, and graphs. And yeah, thanks very much. Have a great day.